We thank the Washington Center for Technical Development for sponsoring this webinar on CRM. So go ahead, Alyssa, please.
Great. Thank you, Ray. Yeah. Hi, everyone. My name is Alyssa Carlson. I'm the South Central Regional Manager with the State Conservation Commission. And it's my honor and privilege to kick this off with Ray Ledgerwood, the man, the myth, the legend, as we've been talking about here. He's now a retired regional manager coordinator from the State Conservation Commission. And if you haven't taken one of his trainings before, it's a real treat. I think I've taken 2 or 3 of these trainings. I always learn something, so really excited to share this with everyone. I also want to thank Levi Kiesecker. He's on the line with us. He is running the newly established Science Hub at the Commission, and he really helped make this happen with some resources that he has available to coordinated resource management groups. And he was realizing as he was talking with districts and other groups around the state, they would kind of look at him with a puzzled expression, what is CRM? So we thought it was high time for a training. And then also just wanted to give a little plug that we had scheduled an advanced facilitation training for CRMs, and that was scheduled for May. Unfortunately, we had to cancel that due to low registration numbers, but we are regrouping. We are planning to hold a training this summer. It's sounding like it'll be in July or beginning of August. So stay tuned. And I'm hearing that if you had signed up and had a place in that previous training for this month, we'll be holding your spot for you for that training, rescheduled training this summer. So also wanted to put a plug in for that, but that's enough of me talking. So I'll hand it over to you, Ray.
Thanks, Alyssa. It's my pleasure to present this webinar today, interactive webinar. So get ready at your place. There's some things that I'm going to ask you to respond to into the chat, and that way we'll have it as part of our record and that sort of thing. So really looking forward to hearing from you on some of your ideas. Well, let's start it right out with that, shall we? Put your name, your organization right into the chat right now, and nothing more, nothing less. Just go ahead and now log the people that have joined us. Of course, our modern technology allows us to be able to do that, but I kind of want to see who's on the group of folks today. We appreciate you attending. Thanks so much for doing that. Our session topics are fourfold today. One is the explain what coordinated resource management is. And with your permission, I may use the acronym CRM a lot today. I'll try not to use acronyms for other things, but CRM, coordinated resource management, it'll go a little faster if I do that instead of spelling it out each time. Why CRM, what it is, and why it was developed in the first place will be our first piece of work. The second would be to explain how CRM has been useful for a common activity, resource management planning activity in Washington State, with some specific examples related to the work that conservation districts do. And in that, I'm also going to talk about some of the other agencies that have used coordinated resource management in their work also. Then I want to explain how CRM will fit with other programs listed there, the Voluntary Stewardship Program, Sage Step Resiliency Initiative, and some of the other programs in the Conservation Commission. And actually, I'm going to talk a little bit about some of those other programs with other agencies too, because we cannot talk about coordinated resource management or CRM without including some of our other partner agencies. More about that in a bit. And I want to highlight the status of CRM as of the spring of 2024, the way I know it as a retired guy, but certainly I want to talk with you if we might about resource needs, future directions, promising applications, lessons learned as we go along. With that groundwork laid then, we're looking forward to this agenda, the self-introductions. Thanks for putting your name and your organization in the chat. The agenda I'm going over right now, and the session topics just went over. And now we're going to move right into the best examples of collaborative processes. From there, we're going to speak about the introduction to CRM, the background and the steps of CRM, talk about a few of those CRM examples, as was asked for this webinar from Washington State. And then want to move from that to the potential for other programs to use CRM principles and steps. We're going to finish our day with our 2-hour session with the status of CRM, resource needs, future directions, promising applications, lessons learned, and then any questions that we might have. Anytime's a good time for a question. So if you just happen to break into a question, we'd love to hear from you. I see that we've got a couple of agency folks from our partner agencies. Welcome, welcome. The Department of Health has joined us, and other folks have joined us along the way. Okay, let's get right to it. Again, chat is a good place for questions. If you want to raise your hand, that's a good time for questions. Mike and I agree that we're just going to take questions as we go along, so you can break in if you want to at any point in time and ask a question. But let's get started. Where did it begin? Coordinated resource management began in Oregon. It's a real Pacific Northwest product, and it began in Oregon in the 1970s. And what was an effort to try to bring together private land ownership in watersheds where public lands were. So we had a big scrum between Forest Service and private landowners adjacent to Forest Service ground, Bureau of Land Management, you name it, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. It started really with the federal lands, public lands, and private land conflicts. And we started to work from there. A fellow by the name of Bill Anderson and another, his colleague Bob Baum, were the founders of Coordinated Resource Management. Bob Baum actually was a NACD, National Association of Conservation Districts, regional person for the Pacific region. His successor, and I tried to do my best in his succession for 13 years, I was the Pacific region representative at NACD, promoting CRM principles out across the nation. It's a consensus and decision-making activity, and it has state memorandums of understanding with partners. Probably one of the strongest things that lifts CRM over other facilitated types of activities is that this state MOU is in place and has never been broken. National MOU. There's a national MOU also in place with partners to promote and to work under the coordinated resource management steps. In that MOU, or Memorandum of Understanding, there is an executive committee that's formed and a task force that's formed. Both of these are important because the executive level is James Thompson's colleagues throughout the entire set of natural resource agencies in Washington state. The task force is made up of folks that serve underneath those executives in a working group. And Alyssa, if I'm not mistaken, you and or Levi are on the task force at this time, is that correct?
Yes, that is correct.
So very important background. I hope that covers just some of the basic background. It's been around quite a long time. And here is our Washington State Coordinated Resource Management Memorandum of Understanding partners that have signed on. Let's just kind of absorb that list. Kind of important folks. And at the executive level, the executive or the regional person for Forest Service would serve. At the Natural Resources Conservation Service, it would be Roy Lean. Bureau of Land Management, it would be the regional person for USDI Bureau of Land Management. Of course, the Washington Association of Conservation Districts, the Commission, the Department of Agriculture, Department of Ecology, Fish and Wildlife, Natural Resources, and University Extension. Pause to reflect a bit. If I had one message for you, and I have several for you today, this is probably one of the big things, is that you already have a memorandum of understanding. These are co-signers. Now, probably one of the things that we fail to do is that when we move new executives into these positions, right, we probably didn't pull up the CRM executive or the memorandum of understanding and sit down and talk with them about it. It probably didn't, cross our mind that we needed to talk with each of these executives about this organizational piece to work on natural resource conservation work. All right, so let's have you jot down notes. Your best example of a collaborative process at work. What made it good? So go ahead, I'm going to just let you just tap that into the chat. If you want to raise your hand and talk about it, that's fine too. Just kind of give us an example. What's the best example you've got? What made it good? If you feel more comfortable, go ahead and jot it down, then type it down. That's fine. Best example of a collaborative process at work. What made it really good? Okay. And we thank all of you for signing in. Well, Jennifer, you said engage partners, collaborative processes at works. I know that you had quite a lot of work to do when you first had your regional conservation partnership program. You put together an active program right there in the district, and you leave with a task. Renee reminds us we leave with a task orders in hand. Levi says honesty, transparency, humanity. The right people are in the room is another good example to make decisions. Good example, Dave. Thank you. James, outcomes, considering the multidisciplinary requirements. Thank you, James. More about that in a bit. You had grassroots input, those folks that were right on the ground. Relationships were built. Go ahead, keep on chugging. Those things that made that really good. The ability to define interest and hopefully find common ground and work toward that. Very good, James. Thank you. Got a couple up here I didn't want to miss, Mike. I think they were early on. You leave with a task progress that doesn't make you shake your head for reinventing the wheel another time around. Thanks, Renee. Recognize a lot of folks that have been involved in some sort of coordinated resource management activity. All right. Okay. These are very, very good examples. Now, let me speak to why coordinated resource management could help with that. And I appreciate you sharing those. First, I want to just kind of go through, and I know that in making a list like this from memory is kind of dangerous because I know there's another list and another list behind this. And I just want to make note and brag a little bit. I think Craig's on the line. Craig, you on the line from Okanagan by chance? May have caught him off guard. Craig, are you on the line by chance? Well, brag a little bit about Okanagan. Okanagan has had coordinated resource management uh, groups in place for several years. They've been ongoing and they deal a lot with that federal and state lands ownership and private lands in a watershed basis. And they are experts in this. Also, I want to brag a little bit about the Central and Eastern Klickitat Conservation District and Underwood Conservation Districts. Each of these conservation districts over the years have had several ongoing coordinated resource management groups that are working. But right behind them, you can talk about Kittitas and Yakima, Soden. I mean, here's a list. The wild horse is actually in Kittitas, and when there was a lawsuit that was being brought on the wild horse regarding wanting to get the livestock off of lands that were purchased by state or federal government um, for use. And that lawsuit led to bringing a group of people together to talk about what the differences could be if we work together. Big Game Council, my friend Jim Huckabee was one of the ones that was very heavily involved in a Big Game Council in the Kittitas area. Okay, there's a question here that I want to tackle in amongst the example here. Is there a link to the CRM agreement in Washington State? The link, Alan, is on the site, and if I could invite maybe Alyssa to go ahead and put that. Conservation Commission has a site just for CRM, and on there they have a handbook that actually has that agreement in it. So, and I think it's the most updated handbook, if I'm not mistaken, Alyssa. Is that correct?
Yes, as far as I understand as well.
Okay. Okay. Back to some examples here. Menashtash was in Kittitas County, Menashtash Creek. There was overusage of water. There was some problems with getting the fish back up the stream. The tribes and environmental organizations were suing the landowners in the area. We brought the landowners together, their attorneys, the irrigation water management folks, the tribes, and et cetera, to talk about what we could do. And a plan was written out of that and was implemented to Soton Creek. different issue there, steelhead coming up the creek and meeting polluted areas on the creek. There was some winter livestock areas in those, and we brought ecology, asked that we bring together the landowners and Washington State University, State of Washington Water Research Center, and the landowners to work on solutions to that. Kittitas wildfire recovery. Gosh, before we had the big wildfires in Okanagan, we had a lot of wildfire in Kittitas County, and we brought groups of people together to talk about what we could do better for preparation. Yakima Tieton irrigation, kind of interesting that in the Tieton irrigation area, they wanted to spin water out of a different irrigation district, and there was a lot of controversy about whether to do that or not do it, how to do it, and that sort of thing. Black Rock came about, and Jim Huckabee was a facilitator there. Black Rock was about the wolves in the Stevens County area. Grays Harbor ghost shrimp. One of my former colleagues, Butch Ogden, could probably give you a litany of discussion with that. Speaking of Butch, Butch was a big promoter of coordinated resource management. We actually did coordinated resource management activities up and down the Chehalis, planning for flood control, and we had some very serious floods in the Chehalis area. I mentioned the Klickitat and Underwood CRMs and more. There's just more examples than we probably have time in our 2 hours to go over, but that hopefully whets your appetite. Alyssa, thanks for popping that link up there. That would be where, again, the handbook is, the CRM handbook. And in that handbook, it speaks about the relationship between the agencies, what the expectations of each agencies were coming into this agreement, and then also the agreement itself. So really good stuff there. All right. CRM is a collaborative group process, and it can be used to bring people together, improve communications, reduce conflicts. And not to say there aren't others, and there are others of the collaborative group processes across the nation and across, your wires, I'm sure, every day. And while I can tell you that coordinated resource management has been successful and will be successful if the right leadership and so forth put time, money, and energy behind it, we can also recognize that there are other collaborative group processes. CRM serves as an umbrella for many types of collaborative, voluntary, locally led processes that result in field implementation of projects to enhance natural resources. So it's not just about bringing the data together, talking about this stuff, papering the walls with easel paper, or filling our computers with data. It's more about, bringing the right people together at the right time to talk about what conditions we want to have in that particular geographic area and how we might go about it, and enlisting their help in defining those actions and getting things going. In CRM, the consensus is the cornerstone for CRM process, and that leads to the decision made by the group. Now, one of the things that's interesting about that is that some members may not feel as, they really overall just are so excited, stand on the chair excited about implementing this, but they can live with it, they can support it, and they can commit themselves to not undermine the things that are coming up with in the coordinated resource management work that they do. One question that we oftentimes ask is, can we live with it? And that question becomes the measure of consensus then. We're not expecting 100% agreement, 100%, this and that, but 100% of the folks in the room can live with it, support it, commit themselves to moving ahead. And one of the reasons why I think that's important is that we come back to it every once in a while in the CRM process. The CRM group will actually come back and take a look at how we're doing on the landscape, what measures that they selected that they wanted to measure and be a part of. The decision is arrived at without voting. So in lieu of voting, we talk, we visit, and yes, we probably even shout a little bit at one another and disagree, but come up with a process to be used where the issues are fully aired. And this takes good facilitation and active facilitation, and a reminder that sometimes the break is our friend, so that we can actually sit and talk about some things, even privately, as a group, and then come back as a group and start to work together. But all members would feel as if they've been adequately heard and everyone has equal power and responsibility in the room. Kind of interesting when I think about consensus and consensus building and the facilitation of that. Oftentimes, I would set a landowner next to an agency person, next to a landowner, next to an agency person, alternate them. So when they wanted to turn to talk with somebody, it wasn't another agency person or another landowner. And that started to build those relationships even in the most subtle way, and the opportunity for people to talk with one another, even though they didn't really feel like they maybe wanted to. They did because that was the seatmate next to them. Kind of interesting fact, I guess you might say about that. All right, basic concept. Coordinated resource management strategies result in improved resource conditions, minimize conflict among landowners, land users, government agencies, and interest groups. So what you're searching for is those actions that can come about to actually do some work. I'm reminded of the Odessa groundwater work that was done. And while we didn't follow all the steps, we followed most of the steps in CRM to arrive at a place where they could choose to what it would look like this economically in that area. The water wouldn't be coming out of the aquifers as deeply as it was in the past, that we would be able to transfer some water from the Columbia and that sort of thing. They, as a group of land users, landowners, cities, counties, government agencies, and interest groups came together, and I'll remember facilitating those meetings with Mike Baden over the course of a year or so, and coming up with plans that are now being implemented. The resource problems are addressed and much more effectively because they're based on the geography of the resource and not constrained by artificial political boundaries. All the politics needed to drop out, especially in that one example I just gave you. But each of the examples that we had had an example where we needed to break down those political boundaries long enough to actually do work together of people that live, work, and recreate in those areas. CRM operates on the local level, as I mentioned. It has a wide-ranging set of influences. And introduced by the Northwest Power Planning Council, they used to speak about power clusters and representation. So everybody in that room, if you had 40, 50 people in that room that were working on this particular resource set of issues in that particular watershed or that particular geographic area, they represented a broad range of cities, counties, agencies, landowners, farmers, ranchers, miners, foresters, and that sort of thing that needed to be represented in the room. The coordinated resource management process was built on that. But one of the reasons why I think it was successful is they actually, before they would start a CRM group, the group would look at who should be in the room. Who are decision makers, not just people that had an interest in something, but the real decision makers. And sometimes those decision makers were also people that were bringing suit upon landowners or agencies and whatnot to do certain things around natural resources. So the philosophy is that those who live, work, and recreate on a given piece of land, property, watershed are the people most interested and capable of developing and implementing the land, the plans for its use, and the ability for them to be able to come together, talk about what it looks like when it should be. Again, let me repeat that question because I want you to write that down if you would. What does this look like when it's working like it should? And in most cases, in the coordinated resource management groups that I had the opportunity to work with, when we asked that question, we would get answers that were very similar to one another, even though the philosophy to get there was completely different. The end result was something that the CRM group could easily get around, post on a wall, make sure it was up in the meetings, and talk about it regularly. This is what it looks like when it's working like it should. Experience has shown people with those diverse viewpoints, as I just mentioned, that voluntarily meet together as a planning team can actually find common ground and they can work together. Okay, this is sounding more and more like this is a Kumbaya group, everybody's singing Kumbaya and that sort of thing. Let me tell you, it's much different than that. There is disagreement, arguments, discussions, uh, discussions about philosophy, the way we go about this, the way we're going to do this kind of work, finally ending up to that common ground. So it's hard work. It's hard work over time. And I think sometimes that's why a collaborative process is kind of so tough because people want instant McDonald's hamburger type of result, right? They want to come, they meet, spend 30 minutes, discuss it, leave and say, I told them so, instead of meeting over time, every month or so for a period of time, and every year after that to make sure that we actually are tracking our resource needs and what we wanted to get done. We have a chance to observe, though, our resource problems firsthand as one of those paramount important things that we would do. So, through discussion, landowners, users, resource managers learn to understand, respect each other's viewpoints. Although each member of the group may have a different interest in the land, or even a lawsuit or whatever it is that they've got going on, that interest in that watershed, the CRM process can help them realize they also have a common interest. What does it look like when it's working like it should? The continued health and productivity of the land and its resources. And then the end result is constructive problem solving through cooperative resource planning. All right. Used effectively and practical in any resource management situations. We found different situations, whether it be forestry, flooding, fire, water quality, wolves, you name it. And if I'm not mistaken, we still have that stuff going around here in Washington State. Even though I've been retired from state service for 4 years, I still read the papers. I still understand we still have a lot of resource issues. So is there a reason why we should continue to work on CRM? Probably yes. The CRM process was built to bridge gaps among private landowners, government agencies, other resource users, and particularly appropriate in areas when resource management issues involve landowners and land ownership under more than one ownership or jurisdiction, and is often thought of as a way to resolve conflicts over land use. But I'm going to present the idea to you today that it can be used and effective to improve communications and coordinating resource management activities among diverse interests, even when there's not a particular interest at hand. Now, one of the kind of interesting things about that last slide is that some of our best, and I'll come back to this probably in a bit, some of our best recommendations for a CRM group to be formed came from those partner agencies. Ecology on water quality, the fish and wildlife, the state fish and wildlife folks would buy a new piece of land, and they had serious concerns by other landowners in the neighboring area, right in the watershed area. For agriculture, they use this quite often for forming and working with their weed boards and their weed groups on what noxious weeds we should be controlling. You go down the list, NRCS would have a new program perhaps, and it was getting some interest and sometimes some negative interest. We would go in and talk with a group of people in a certain area about how it could benefit them. So lots of uses beyond just an issue, but issue related things oftentimes were where we went because that's where the sponsoring agencies would take us. We would meet as a task group and actually receive nominations for the next CRM group that should be formed, plan for who could facilitate that and who could work with them. So generally, all the decisions are made in a group consensus, no votes taken, and the consensus decisions result in a successful CRM plan with steps and actions to be done that will be strongly supported by every member of the planning group. And again, if we've done our work in the formation of the CRM group, then all the representative folks and agencies and landowners would be in the room working on this at the same time, leaving nothing to chance. Okay. Mike and Alyssa, let's stop right there and see if there's a few questions before I dive into the steps. I want to talk with you about the steps in CRM, and you'll recognize these steps to be important steps that are also in other collaborative processes that you may have been exposed to. So let's take the first question or two, Alyssa. Mike, if you see a question in there, I'm watching the chat, hoping that the questions come flowing in. Hey, just raise your hand or unmute and give us a question or an experience you had with CRM before I move on too much further.
Not seeing any hands or chats.
Okay. Well, let me call on you, Alyssa. You've been around. I used to call you the young one, but you're not the young one anymore. You get to be the older one. What have you seen in CRMs? You got some CRMs in your area, don't you? Yeah. What do you see?
There are, yeah, I'm currently based in Ellensburg. But before I came to work for the commission, I worked for the Okanagan Conservation District and helped out with the small grazing CRMs up there. I call them small because it was usually just the producer, but all of the public agencies that they had leases on or that affected their grazing plan would come to this meeting before every grazing season and then put a plan together, grazing plan. And also it was an opportunity, if there are any questions, what are the policies for this and that, for fence repair, purchasing materials, making improvements, the agencies that were in attendance there was a way to have a collective conversation about that. And I don't want to steal because I don't work for the Okanagan CD anymore. I think I saw, I think Aaron Wold with Okanagan CDs on the line here, and he's currently the coordinator for those CRMs and facilitator. But yeah, that was a really effective way for ranchers to be able to resolve issues and also identify potential projects that we could go out and find funding for.
Yeah. So Aaron, you want to share a couple minutes here on what CRM has brought you there in the Okanagan?
Yeah. Alyssa summed it up nicely. They're small CRMs. I think we have 14 right now. They've been going on for 20 plus years.
Yeah.
They're great at discussing, on state agency, Forest Service lands, and BLM, they all have different rules, and the grazing infrastructure comes from a range of different places. And within this meeting, we kind of develop a plan to both for utilization and stocking rates, but also how to address the natural resource sources within the CRM geographical location. So
And you bring up
it's a great way to get to know the stakeholders in the rangeland world.
Yeah, and the action plans that come from those, and these are long-standing CRMs. We have a couple of different types of CRMs I can speak to in a little bit, but let me mention it now. Some that are ongoing, like the Okanagan examples. I'm going to call on you, Tova, in just a bit about Underwood and some of the examples there. But we have these long-standing ones where the people meet, they talk, they analyze how the year went, right, toward the resource issues and what they wanted to do, how it's working, and what could be changed, what could be done differently, coming up with an action plan for that next upcoming year. Thanks, Aaron. Thanks, Alyssa. Hey, Tova, would you join us? Talk with us about your experience in Underwood.
Oh, I will try. We've had CRMs in our area in the Western Klickitat County area since probably the mid 80s, which it began kind of as some kind of all-out battling going on over land because there was a lot of free range cattle happening, open range happening, where cows just got dropped off and picked up at the end of the season. And it was kind of mayhem. It wreaked havoc on the natural resources. Nobody had real control over what was happening on the landscape. There was really very little management. So that's when the CRM groups got started, and it's been going ever since. And similar to what Alyssa described, we've had annual meetings at the beginning of the grazing season or before the grazing season starts, just to outline all the different issues. All the landowners are there, whether they're federal landowners, state landowners, or the private timberland owners. And so it's a really good set of stakeholders, great participation, and the producers come and present their plan for the grazing year. And it's just a really good conversation overall. It keeps everybody connected and communicating about all the important issues.
Mm-hmm. You know, there's again, Tova and Aaron, their districts represent those ongoing CRMs that are meeting regularly and doing work like that. And then we find that these nominations for some CRM groups to come together because of a serious issue. You know, we're not going to run from the fact that sometimes there's lawsuits, right? And there's a lot of people that want to impose their will on a certain set of resources, but bringing them together with the people that are there on the resources oftentimes will lead to some healthy discussions, and you hope some suggested changes and some actions to be done. So thanks for sharing, Tova. And Jennifer, Jennifer Boyle, you've had an experience or two with CRMs, if I remember right, in the Palouse region.
Yeah, we did actually. You were getting some kudos last week on the tour that we pulled together for the Conservation Commission, because one of our stops was Clark Farms,
Ah,
and the family members, or a couple of family members, were on the tour talking about how the CRM kind of kickoff conversations that you were able to facilitate a few years back between WSU, different landowners, and family members had really kicked off this opportunity to create a bunch of habitat and riparian work, and create kind of a wildlife corridor and contiguous conservation work. So yeah, that the members in that group continue to meet, and we've been able to find funding and put conservation projects on the ground under those initial CRM conversations.
that one's kind of interesting because you had the private landowners, and then you had
Mm-hmm.
Washington State University, if I remember right, had some properties in that area.
Yes.
A not-for-profit, non-governmental entity had lands in those areas, and they were able to sit around a kitchen table and go out. They went out into the properties and took a look, and then they sat around the kitchen table, I remember, and had cookies and coffee,
Yes.
talked about the way it should be in the Smoot Hill area when it actually works. So that's just one more example of some of that. Alan brings up that the CRM agreement between the Commission, WACD, CDs, and the Department of Ecology on water quality seems to have expired or has not been implemented or active recently. Kind of interesting, Alan, that you should mention that. So these are two separate things. A water quality agreement to implement certain things would be different than the coordinated resource management agreement, which set up a platform for doing this type of work and following these steps. So two different things. You would hope that they would transcend and work together. And not to put too much pressure on James, but here it comes, James, from an old retiree, saying that really happens at that executive level. When James meets with a director of ecology or fish wildlife or DNR and that sort of thing, or even at that cabinet level of the governorship that we have in Washington State, many of those players that are on this agreement are also players on the governor's. Help me think this through, James. It is the natural resources cabinet level. So you kind of got some real power there, but we've got a really poor way of orienting the new directors to what they've got, right? So we need to do that, and we so appreciate James being on with us today, so we can share, and then maybe we can build that kind of relationship on ecology's standpoint. That a colleague of mine way back when, Chad Atkins, used to bring us regular CRM potential groups, right? Around the around the water quality issue, water quality problem. He was very heavily involved in the Black Hills activity that we had going on there. All right, let's go through some steps. Thanks for those examples. Thanks for letting me call on my friends out there to talk about some of your specific examples. It's so much more fun to hear those than to listen to me again. But I do want to go over these 10 steps. And again, you're going to find these in collaborative processes in multiple ways, right? You're going to find a new collaborative process to do this. It'll probably have many of these 10 steps. We think it was really important to get these 10 steps, and I can explain each one a little bit about why it was important. But first, recognizing the opportunity for collaborative approach and getting organized. So if we had it working like it should, right? The point I was making a few minutes ago, agencies, conservation districts, others would be bringing up a potential coordinated resource management group need, right? Wildfire, flooding, forest management, squabbles between the private landowners and public landowners, and that sort of thing. DFW just bought a new hunk of land, and you got neighbors that are kind of worried about what's going to go on in that area, bringing them together to talk about those things. Got lawsuits, that sort of thing. That's the recognition. Conducting the first meeting. Folks, this is very important. That first meeting is so important because you want to invite the area landowners, the resource managers, and other interested groups that can participate that have a stake in this. This is the essence of stakeholder involvement, because it's not just somebody that cares about it, but it's somebody that can make a decision about that piece of landscape, that water, that aquifer, that whatever. And you want to do this, the first meeting is a combination recommended by CRM, is that you would have an in-field and a meeting. So you would go put the boots on, go out and take a look at the geographic area that you're talking about, some of the issues that you see, have a good discussion among the people that you invited, and then come back into the meeting and talk about, what we want to do about it, what data we need, how we would go about this, what it looks like when it is working like it should. So the stars of the show in that first meeting are those area landowners, including the agency landowners, the resource managers and others, that they really can lay out the lay of the land literally. All right. From that, defining the geographic boundaries. Okay, it'd be this area, this watershed, these two watersheds, this part of the state, this part of a watershed, even a sub-watershed. We've done CRMs in any one of those things. Considering the multiple use of the resource issues and collecting existing data. You live in such a wonderful time, and I can say this from the guy that worked in this arena since '79. You have more data than probably you know what to do with. You have more programs and more funding than we ever thought in our wildest dream that we would have in the '70s and '80s and '90s. And there it is, right there, ready to be organized. But I do believe that CRM has a place because somebody needs to organize that stuff. Somebody needs to get that, energy turned to a positive energy with people working together at that local level. Because we got enough negative energy going on, right? But we got a lot of resources to deploy. So why not, make that happen, through the CRM process. The fifth one I wanted to mention is to identify individual objectives and problems, giving consideration to all resources. So this is where you went out, you took a look at the land and the properties in the water and that sort of thing, what's going on, and you're considering all the resources, and now you can come up with, by this date, we would like to see this. By that date, we'd like to see that. By this date, we'd like to see the other, whatever that might be, right? Okay. Sixth step, develop an action and funding plans. And this was something that was mentioned early on in the chat. We want these to result in action and funding plans to achieve the objectives. So you got the objectives. By this date, we want to do this, 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 and that. The actions to get there would be this, this, and that. The funding proposals that we need to put in would be this, this, and this. And if you take Odessa again, probably was the most recent one before I retired that I was working on with Mike Baden. It came about as, okay, we want to pull the water from the Columbia. Oh my gosh, we need this kind of legislation, this kind of funding, this kind of this and that in order to get that done. We want to get the Bureau of Reclamation to help us with this, and we want NRCS to help us with this. What programs do they have? How do we reach those programs? How do we apply for those fundings? And you saw the applications come flowing in to PL 566, RCPP. The Department of Reclamation has their own set of programs and whatnot that they can use. And while they weren't a co-signer of the CRM processes, they grasped hold of this pretty quickly. Ecology was a big player. Extension was a player. Commission was a player. The Conservation District's a player. You get the picture. And so, and whether it was wolves in Stevens County, whether it was water quality in Asotan County, whether it was water resources to get salmon back into the Menashtash, whether it was flooding in the Chehalis, each of these folks these groups came up with action and funding plans to achieve. Okay, the objectives. Evaluate the group process. Very, very important part of this is that you would meet regularly, sometimes more frequently in the early part of the formation and a little less frequently, but no less than annually, to evaluate how we're progressing. How are our applications being received at funding sources? How are our suggestions for policy being received? And are we making progress? Is landowner A, B, C, and D on with us? And does that give us a concert of thought, among the affected folks? Folks, we're looking with interest at the Department of Transportation putting in the salmon friendly activities they're doing, spending millions of dollars, and realizing that somewhere up that stream, there's somebody that's not participating, usually, some landowner that didn't want to participate and didn't have to. And I think CRM, just for that in itself, right? Salmon on the Department of Transportation, salmon projects would be a good collaborative process to take on, even before they turn the first, piece of soil or put in the first chunk of wood, in the stream. Anyway, create and reevaluate the plans to ensure that the problems and the objectives are considered and addressed. So we get into a good planning process. We got the group process working. We evaluate how it's going along, and we're making the changes. And sometimes mid-course corrections are needed. Sometimes we find a new funding source. Sometimes we need to get help from another agency or organization. This is step number 8, where we do that regularly, no less than once a year, sometimes more often than that in the early days. We devise a field monitoring system, and Levi is just smiling. I can see him smiling right now about the importance of a field monitoring system and scheduled annual review sessions. And I like to suggest that you take your whole group out there again and take a look at the field. What's going on? What's going on in the water? What's going on in the soil? What's going on in the plants? Are we getting the effect that we want? And then through those annual review sessions, we're making those mid-course corrections again. That's part of the evaluation, part of the reevaluation, part of the replanning. And then we implement the plan for our field projects. Yearly progress review, adaptive management, and come right back into it again and make sure. Now, steps 1 through 3 or 4 go fairly rapidly when you got a group that's already working. Tova, and Alan will tell you that those folks that have been, or Aaron, that would have been meeting regularly. They're meeting regularly, and they're just cruising along, and just each year they come together. But I'm sure that they've got suggested changes. Weather events occur, other events occur, policy changes occur, elections occur. Oh my gosh, you list all these outside influences that we have on our resource base, and you find that you need to go back and look at this. So there are the steps. Again, I'm on the webinar today to share with you coordinated resource management, with the full recognition that there are other collaborative processes out there that will be sent to you and made aware, as we go along. But certainly we thought this one worked. We saw it work. We saw the results. We saw the successes we had. We even saw the failures that we had and knew what to do about them when we encountered some failures. And all in all, we thought we had a pretty good system here, backed up with a memorandum of understanding, which I think is very important. So that description of an area, including the land ownership, resources, and features, would be an important piece of a CRM, a list of the land and resource management objectives. By this date, this is what we want to have, and that all the parties have contributed and agree on for that geographic area. A list of management activities or activities that we want to pursue. And some of those activities are management activities. Some of them are administrative activities and preparing and filing for grant proposals to achieve those objectives. And the location of each project and the practices noted. All right. A sequence of activities that will be implemented is an important part of any of the plans, recognizing that we might have to change that based on some things that go on, but we at least have a sequence of activities that we have put together and have vetted with the entire set of the stakeholders for that particular area for that CRM group. Approximate timing or schedule for the beginning and completing of the projects and practices, and a commitment from the responsible parties to accomplish each activity. So we can count on this landowner to do that, and this agency to do this, and this other entity to do that. Those that have a stake in that landscape. Have a means for evaluation of the plan, strategies for adapting it to new problem changing. All right. Let's pause again, Alyssa. See if we can get some more comments about any of those steps, and before I move on to the use of CRM.
Not seeing anything, Ray.
I am so happy we're going back to in-person type of meetings now too, because those are so cool now, because I can actually walk around and invite people to actually talk with me and ask me a question. So any questions out there? We'll give you another chance. Okay. All right. So the use of CRM steps. This is important because individuals identify the potential programs that they could use in the CRM steps. So there's probably no better system for putting together a regional conservation planning proposal than coordinated resource management. You think about it. You're supposed to bring in partners, stakeholders. You're supposed to bring in the people that are affected. You're supposed to ask them for help and them to put in some resources, time, money, and energy. So it's all right there. And so you could probably crank that into a USDA resource conservation partnership program pretty easily. And then when you advance bigger than that, a whole watershed area like Odessa and others have done, Chehalis, for example, those are good programs for going into the Public Law 566 watershed programs of NRCS, for example. But if we look at it and through the context of that, and we say, okay, Commission's got some programs, NRCS has got some programs, Ecology's got some programs, Fish and Wildlife has some programs, Bureau of Interior has a Bureau of Reclamation, even though they're not a co-signer on this, they could be. I'll come back to that in a little bit. Get where I'm going with it. So it's a great way to put together a project proposal, even if that's all it does. But guaranteed it probably won't be all it does, because people are going to want to know how our application went in, whether or not we were funded, can we get started on the first set of activities. And so the sharing and discussion of programs that would benefit from using these CRM steps. Okay, so switching gears, we're on item number 3, I think, here of what we wanted to talk about. Well, you have advanced so much in 4 years since I've been gone from the commission. I mean, we had a few of these programs, but not all of them. And we certainly didn't have the funding that you have now, nor the staffing within the commission conservation district system that we have now. Let me just say, congratulations. Good on you. That's stuff that we dreamt about. And in 1979, we didn't even dream about something as crazy as some of the programs I've got listed here on the screen right now. They're wonderful. They're awesome. And I'll just cut to the chase. Coordinated resource management steps, those 10 steps. Let me just ask you a question. Do you think you could use those 10 steps in these things? Yes or no? You can go ahead and put it in the chat. Do you think you could use it for Conservation Reserve Enhancement Program, for example, bringing people together to talk about what CREP would look like in an area? The Disaster Assistance Program, oh my gosh, we've proven that a couple of times in floods, fires, and other things where we've brought together people to talk about what it is that is needed on the landscape. How about our farmland protection and land assessment? I mean, my goodness, what better program could we use CRM for than to have people that are interested in farmland protection and land access program to be able to do that? Forest health and community wildfire. You're already doing some of this with DNR, and some of it districts are doing, but this is a big one, in terms of bringing people together in an area to talk about how we could prepare for wildfire resiliency. How could we prepare? What types of things do we want to see on the landscape? Maybe in a whole county, but certainly in certain watersheds and subwatersheds. How about those irrigation efficiencies? Again, Monash Hash and some of the other ones that we worked on over the years became places that we really wanted to see an overall effort by the landowners and agencies working together for irrigation efficiencies. And if John Culp was one of the ones that was involved in that in the early days, I don't even know who the individual is now for staff. Natural resource investments, these are projects and programs at a district level, and certainly we could deal with a CRM there. How about riparian grant program? See a place perhaps for the riparian grant program. You got a stream, and you've got landowners within the stream, and you want them to work together, with the agencies and whatnot. It certainly seems logical. Same with the salmon recovery funding. If you can bring those salmon up this far on the salmon bearing stream, can we bring them a little farther by having landowners and working together on that? And the shellfish program, certainly, and we did have a ghost shrimp program, CRM, for a while with the affected folks around the shellfish area. Again, my friend Butch Ogden's on the line. He could tell you all about that. The Sustainable Farms and Fields program, Sustainable Farms and Fields Climate Smart, livestock, and even in district operations, you could start to think through these 10 steps and say, oh, well, maybe we should take the whole district board out into the field and give them a tour and talk about, what we need to do even before we start planning our district operations thing. Are we addressing the highest priority resource issues in our district? Okay, another pause for stop, Alyssa and Mike. All right, love to hear from you. Just unmute and tell me whether or not you think even the commission programs could stand a good dose of CRM. Yes or no? I want to hear some voices, please.
Hey Ray, can you hear me okay?
Gotcha. Yep.
I'm
Go
not
ahead.
like
Levi.
a chipmunk anymore. All right, great. Hey, I just want to chime in. I see all kinds of potential. Maybe I've already drank the Kool-Aid. I might have missed a minute of this with a rough internet connection, so I don't know if you talked about VSP. But for folks on the line who are part of VSP,
Oh.
there are watershed work groups that are making decisions about how to allocate resources and projects and work together. And so I just wanted to plant that seed that I think that there's a lot of opportunity there, and I would love to have more conversations about how that might look if there's interest. So,
I remember Ron Schultz and I, God rest him, and Mark Clark having those very discussions, Levi, and we felt like this CRM 10 steps should be what any county that was doing VSP would start with. And the activity schedules, the practices we wanted to promote, the activities we wanted to do together on a countywide basis, the practices that we would promote, all of that seems to fit this. So thanks. And I must have left it off that last slide. I should have had that on there as the first one, right? Because voluntary stewardship program is a key one. Thanks, Levi. Let's hear some more comments, please, before I talk about the status of CRM in 2024.
Hey,
More
Ray.
comments. Yep.
Ray, this is
Butch?
Butch. In the early 90s, Calvert Conservation District put together a CRM group on a watershed basis
Mhm.
that the initial meeting had over 200 people at it,
Yeah.
which is too many, but
Yeah.
it worked.
Yeah.
And the number one concern was fish blockages on these streams.
Yeah.
So the district went out, found funding, and did a stream survey on, walked every mile of those streams to the head of the ephemeral draws
Mm-hmm.
and documented all the blockages.
Mm-hmm.
They then shared this information with the group, which included a representative from two major timber companies, Bonneville Power Administration, and Fish and Wildlife.
Mm.
Over the next 4 years, there was over 1,000 culverts replaced in that watershed without any federal or state money.
Wow. Oh my gosh. Well, it's a power.
CRM works.
Yeah, it does. And when it works like that, it really captures the interest of a lot of folks in the agencies, the governor's office and others. I remember so much interest, when Chris Gregoire was the governor, we used to have
God.
regular conversations, but about that. But she would bring our executive director in at the time, Mark, and really grill him on what projects were going on, needed to happen, where what funding was needed, and that sort of thing. It was very, very important. But I'm gonna shoot off because one of the things I didn't talk with you about too, those were just examples from Washington State Conservation Commission. Now you think about Fish Wildlife, Washington State has another set of programs, right? Along with VSP, Voluntary Stewardship Program, and the other things. And Ecology has another set of programs. Extension has a set of programs. You get where I'm going with this? I'm going right into the heartbeat of the co-signers coming up with ideas for where the next CRM group should be formed and why. And who is really having a difficult time, whether it be ghost shrimp or whether it be fire, whether it be flood, whether it be whatever. One of the things that's interesting about that idea of that representation, right? But I'm sensing that probably, that even 4 years ago we didn't have enough orientation for new executives coming on or new staff people coming on in those agencies. WACD, commission, districts, extension, you just list those and you think, oh my gosh, how could we revive this a bit so people would know these 10 steps and be looking at the possibilities? In Wyoming, it was kind of interesting because Wyoming's districts sued the Environmental Protection Agency because they felt like the streams that were listed on the, is it the 303D list? I got that right? I hope. Yeah, 303D list of impaired water streams in Wyoming were wrong. And of course they wanted to prove that, none of them should be on it. Well, what happened was EPA came back to them, and as part of the settlement of the suit, they said, we will give you money, conservation districts, to go out and find out, what streams are impaired and which ones aren't. So they started a very active water quality monitoring program that collected the data and said this stream segment needs to stay on, this one needs to come off, this one needs to go on. And the results were not necessarily what the districts wanted when they brought suit at the beginning, but they were true, right? And they were data driven and they were correct. And so they were able to do that. So more hands-on kind of work going on. Now, CRM's kind of a big thing. And CRM's kind of a big thing in a lot of our Western states. In fact, if we go Washington, Oregon, very active programs. Idaho had a very active program at one time. Montana, very active program. Colorado, Wyoming, Nevada, California, all active CRM programs. Or in California, they called it CRMP, Coordinated Resource Management Planning. Okay, Tova, let's hear your question. Let's go. What about a question?
Hi, no, I was going to just make a quick comment. I found an old quote about the origination of our district here, and it was about how individual farmers were struggling with certain different problems, whether it was crop productivity and irrigation problems or rodents even. There was a number of different issues that individuals were dealing with. And the reason our conservation district was established was to develop community solutions and come together and really leverage each other's strengths and be able to find solutions together. And I was just going to say with the CRM process, what I've observed over the years is that I think it's a model that it's like conservation planning at the individual level, where you might be able to deliver a conservation plan for one producer at one property, but at the CRM level, it's for the community level or the watershed scale, where you're coming together with all of the different stakeholders and parties and coming up with, of course, inventorying natural resources, identifying the concerns, addressing the needs, and planning the work, finding funding, and actually getting the work done. It's like a conservation plan on steroids at the community level.
Yeah.
So
And when
that's
we
how
think
I
about
see it.
yeah, and at least 4 years ago, when we thought of voluntary stewardship program, we thought of it at the county level too, right? So it would be a conservation plan at that county level. Unsurpassed. I mean, the only thing that would relate to voluntary stewardship in my day was clear back into when we put together best management practices, Tova and group. And what we did there is we brought communities together to talk about what practices, what issues we had, what resource issues, and what we needed to do about it, and what practices that we could defend as would improve water quality, would be socially acceptable and economically feasible to do. And that was an effort done in those 70s, late 70s, early 80s. Big effort then. Every county had a set of best management practices and whatnot. So great example. And hey, let me go back to Sarah just for a second. Hey, Sarah, do you want to pop in, talk about voluntary stewardship some more program and how you feel following up on what Tova just said?
Hi, everyone. I'm Sarah Wilcox. I am the interim voluntary stewardship program coordinator here at the
Congratulations, by the
commission.
way.
Yeah, thank you. No, it's a pleasure to be in that role. I think we have a lot of opportunity, as Levi said. The strength of a VSP program really lies in the work group and the strength of the work group. And so if there's a way that we can assist counties with that, we also are going through some program updates and changes. So I'm sitting here contemplating how I would implement CRM and just our work group process that we're going to set up for VSP coming up this summer. So I think there's a lot of opportunity to take learnings from that and put it to work right away for us.
Yeah.
We have some big things coming up. We have budget package development.
Yeah.
We have some process and procedure within our program. And then we have some bigger policy things that we need a lot of input on. So we've got some great opportunities ahead of us.
Thanks, Sarah. Anybody else want to add something there? We'd love to hear from you if you do.
I'll just jump in real quick. This is Jennifer Gua, the director at Palouse Conservation District, and kind of tying in what Sarah and Tova touched on, and Ray, the whole list of things we could use CRM. I think it's really cool to think about CRM within the farmland preservation scale and lens, and what Tova said about conservation planning being for an individual land manager and how succession planning might be for an individual family, but CRM might be appropriate for a larger context for them to be thinking about farmland preservation at a whole landscape scale. So
Mhm.
thought that was kind of a neat light bulb that went off in my head.
Yeah. You know, I've got a friend in North Carolina and she said similar thing, Jennifer. It was like she wanted to get she's right there in Charlottesville, right? Where the agricultural land is just being eaten up, you know, by leaps and bounds. Wanted to protect the last bit. So she convened her farmer friends, right? All the farmer friends she could get, and the legislators, and you know, the county elected officials, and brought them together to talk about the importance. But one of the things we suggested was get out on the ground first before you even go in the meeting room, and just go on the ground and look at it. What could it look like? Could we keep farmland here, 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 and here? What would it look like when it was working like it should, right? You know that's one of my favorite questions. Y'all do. And so what does it look like when it's working like it should? And then move into the meeting room and say, well, we've got data on this and data on that. And what's it going to take? Asking the landowners themselves that are right there on that landscape, right? What would it take to be able to move wealth, right, to a retired owner, right, so that the younger generation can come in, things like that. It's incredible. It blows my mind, the potential. But the potential with people forming a CRM, right, where they could support one another, help one another, agencies could help one another based on what it is that the landowners themselves are saying, right, and help them actually do that. Now we got something. Now we got something. And something that the landowners don't feel is pushed upon them because they help develop it. Oh gosh. Jennifer, I don't know if you remember this or not, but buffers in the Palouse. I will never forget that meeting. You bring 15, 16 landowners together, the anti-buffer. Oh, hell no, we're not going to do buffers. And the question I asked them is said, okay, I know you guys don't want buffers, but if you build a buffer program, what would it look like? If it worked like it should, what would it look like? And the idea of just, you know, giving the difference between what they would get from cropping that land and then maybe haying it or grazing it, you know, and putting alfalfa next to those riparian areas. And I get the biggest smile whenever I drive through the Palouse, right? And I see one more alfalfa set next to a buffer, right? Buffering a stream. Congratulations on that, by the way. But I really believe in my heart the basis for CRM really is bringing the local people together and asking them the question, what does it look like when it's working like it should? And then from there, how do we get people organized, get people on board, and not only just some people, but I mean elected officials and agencies that have funding and all that sort of thing. You got me pretty excited. Thanks, guys. Anybody else with another thought on this subject as we go along?
Hey Ray, this is Craig Nelson up in Okanagan. We don't know much about this subject. And in fact, I was hoping somebody could even like teach me how to spell CRM. I was hoping that maybe
complete BS. Thanks.
We get some lessons on this. Well, we know a lot about BS because we find it all over the place out there. Ecology tells us that it's in the water. But we do actually like this methodology. We've been using it for a day or two, and just wanted to say thank you for helping spread the word about this very, very important tool. I guess what I did want to seriously say is we've been using it so long. We use it in places we don't even realize we're using it anymore. And I think that's one of the really cool things about CRM is that once you start applying it and using it, you'll find that you're using it when you look back and go, we were doing that and didn't even realize we were doing that. And that's a really cool moment when you realize that you're making things happen and it's things are moving quite a bit easier and smoother than you had anticipated, just because there's a really good system to kind of keep things moving and progressing when normal systems would have hiccups and roadblocks and things like that. So one of the things that we have really counted on with CRM, particularly when we're dealing with the crossroads of private and public lands, is the fact that all of these agencies have all signed on to CRM that they're going to at least come to the table. And, you know, especially when there's been turnover at these agencies and you get somebody new in there and they're like, oh, no, we're too busy. We can't do that. And, you know, I just come walking into the office with a copy of the MOU or, you know, and say, yeah, you will. We'll see you on Tuesday at, 2:00 at the, such and such location. And they kind of hang their head in shame and okay, fine. And then of course, after a couple of meetings, they start to see, all right, we get it now, Some of them still don't like it and they grumble about it the whole time, but that's a separate issue. But it really is a good program. So thank you.
Well, and we have experts, those people that just have spoken, have had experience, personal experience in implementing and facilitating, and it really, really it matters when you do that. Let me just say, as we go into the status, I want to pull this up, which is the handbook. Let's test this and see if our technology seems to work all right. Make us a little bigger, a little bigger, a little bigger. How's that look to you guys? All right, big thumbs up. Yes or no? Gotta go. Okay, so here it is. Here is that agreement. Now, Allison, help me out. I think 2015 is the latest one I had on my files. There could be a more modern one.
That's the one we have on our website.
Okay, that's the one I found on your website. So yeah, but it talks about the preamble, why this is important, some of the resource issues we hope to work on. Oh, here are the co-signers, right? Now, there's nothing to say that you can't have another agency or organization co-signer. And on the task force, we actually have people that serve, what do we call them? Members. They're not auxiliary members or anything, but anyway, bottom line, executive level of all those agencies, right? And organizations, and worker level at all those organizations. All right. And the purpose is laid out, the policy is laid out. It's kind of cool. The authority is laid out, right? Given by each one of them to enter this. We've got one of these at the national level I talked with you about, if you might have missed that early on in the presentation, but at the national level, this is it. Craig is right. And he just prompts me to come up and just say, look at these things that they say, the responsibility of the agencies and organizations. So Craig is not wrong. If you wanted to start a CRM, you might have this handbook pretty handy because it talks about the 10 steps that I went over and all that sort of thing. But it also has this agreement, which I think is very powerful. Craig reminds us of that. So there's the Natural Resource Conservation Service, the commission, right? What we do and what we've done, the Department of Natural Resources. Oh my gosh. And that figure is probably small now. 5.6 has probably went up, right? To what they manage now. But of these, these, and they wrote these agencies wrote these when this was redone, this latest version. So same with Fish and Wildlife, yada, yada, yada. Washington State University Extension, kind of a good one to remind them, right, that we need them, especially with some of their facilitation talents and some of the other things, and the Association of Conservation Districts, State Department of Agriculture, State Department of Ecology. Now, there are some old hats within the body of those agencies that still remember CRM and successful CRMs in those agencies. So rely on them to kind of help you out a little bit with promoting this. So I'm not going to go deeper into that because we could really talk a lot about that. But I think what I want to do here is move on to the status. Okay. Okay. Any questions about the MOU though? Where to find it? Alyssa sent you a nice copy of where that is. Good. Okay. I'm a retired guy. I guess that means I get to make some proclamations and some ideas for you. So here it comes, unfiltered from Ray, the short bald guy that's retired. The status. Now, I don't mean to offend anybody on the webinar today, but I might be a little bit blunt. First of all, let's start with the good side. We've got functioning CRMs. Wow, Tova, I think you said 14 or 15. Holy moly. Craig, I can't even imagine. It's got to be that or more, maybe in Okanagan area also. So good on us, right? And we got those. And those that were about putting those together and facilitating those in the past, good on you. So we do. We've got some dormant CRMs. Let me just talk about dormancy for a bit. That's not all bad. Because if you reach that point where things are working like the group said they wanted them to work like, and their annual event is kind of a doing good, let's go, let's have some coffee and cookies and enjoy the moment and move on, that's a good thing. I mean, for some of us that have facilitated CRMs and been around this, we look forward to the day when that happens, right? When the problem's solved or issues aren't really relling up on us as badly as something else might be, and we're good. Now, the potential. Unless I've missed something, there are still resource issues. Big nod, agreement, yes or no? Yeah. And they're kind of big. And the political environment now is charged up about as about as charged up as I've ever seen it in my life, right? People are wearing their politics right on their shirt sleeves. So those two things, really important natural resource things, and a political environment that's charged, just demands that there's probably potential CRMs out there. And if you think, again, let's go to VSP, because I want to make mention of that. If you bring a county-wide group of people together, right, then you can expect there's going to be a lot of stuff going on. And within that, I hope you find some potential CRMs, maybe on a sub-county basis or maybe the whole county basis, whatever it might be. It would be the potential is there. It's just great. If we polled Fish Wildlife right now and said, you got a couple CRMs that need to be formed, if CRMs do this, do that, you got a couple that might be formed, I bet they'd take us to probably two new land purchases and say, oh man, we got it going. If we went to agriculture and said, you got some weeds coming about in one of our counties, they say, oh yeah, they take us to 2 counties that they got serious weed problems. You get where I'm going with this? The potential is just, and unless I'm mistaken, we've not finished all of our work in water quality. So ecology would lead us right to water quality. NRCS would lead us right to some of the local work group stuff that's going on. FSA, if they were a co-signer, would do that. We have the chair of the Farm Services Agency on our webinar today. Did you know that? Wave your hand, Butch. Say, hey, pretty cool. All right. Resource needs. So the status is we still have resource needs. And those resource needs aren't just natural resources. Let me talk about other resource needs. We need people. We need people, and especially facilitators. And we need facilitators that are really experienced, that can walk into a room and diffuse at least a situation or get the people talking about what it's going to look like when it's working like it should, rather than just letting it be a big feeding frenzy. So what Alyssa and Levi are working on in terms of advanced facilitation is designed for folks that have been facilitating, but want some advanced facilitating skills. Very important thing. But we also need the basic facilitators, right? We need folks that want this. They love to get up in front of a group of people and diffuse a bad situation and turn it into something good, right? That's not everybody. Don't expect everybody to be a facilitator, but those that you have, cherish them, help them get trained, help them with resources. If they ask for something, make sure to do that. James, back in the day when I was working for the commission, my boss, Mark Clark, you probably heard of him too, used to volunteer us regularly for facilitated activities. So much so I didn't have a day on my calendar for anything other than, facilitation, even though I had other duties. But good guy. But he loved this stuff. He loved us, the commission being, and districts being a part of facilitated activities. So we need leadership. Now, let me be a little bit bold here. Doggone it all, we better get an orientation of some kind by the task group or someone to every one of the executives. Each one of the 10 or 11 on that list deserves to know what CRM is. They may choose not to really jump up and down on their desk and really go to a happy place with it, but at least they know, right? And they might use it when they consider it. Every executive committee needs an orientation, and the task group, well-meaning people, but they are trying to push this rope with just the available resources they have. They've got other jobs. They all have other jobs. That's always been the way it is. It doesn't mean it has to be the way it should be. If it was working, that task group would be receiving invitations for CRMs to be formed. They'd be pairing it with the facilitators I just spoke about, and they would be launching these things, and they'd have money in the commission's budget and Levi's budget to at least, once they came up with their initial plan and initial budget, that there would be a budget to fund some of that early work. And if it's VSP, great. If it's one of the other programs, great. And we need staff support. We've lost a lot because I think we've had enough turnover in all of those 11 agencies, right? Where if you mention coordinated resource management, they're not going to know what you're talking about. So again, I think what we really need is an orientation, or at least an opportunity to talk with the agencies about where could we get staff support? Where do we get staff support from ecology, fish wildlife, WACD, any of those, right, that are co-signed, and the commission. Then I'm so pleased that you had funding in the commission budget, but I understand that budget is running out, and there's a question whether or not we should put money in for CRM? My answer is, and I know it's just, prejudice as heck. Heck yes. You must do this. And you must call it the Norm McClure Honorary CRM funding source for new startups and for project activity grants for existing CRMs that are in force and for newly burgeoning CRMs that are in force. Now, I know the tussle now is we never could figure out where we needed to put this. But if you put it in the commission overall has been a good umbrella for this because you could work with any one of the agencies and work closely with them, and you do work closely with them. So a logical place to put this money would be there. Now, you divvy it out based on what the task group and the executive committee said were the criteria, right, for how the fundings would be used. But I also think that some of this funding goes right back up into here in helping with facilitator training and development. Those people that are going to be out there doing this. And a facilitator, I remember in the 70s and 80s when I first broke into facilitation, I had a mentor from Extension, Dr. Kelsey Gray, who I got to take session designs to, talk about programs, talk about meetings, talk about this and that in the way that she would help me understand how I should progress. Then I would come back and do an evaluation with her. And she'd ask me tough questions about how it went and then give me advice on what I should have done differently. And then, help me along the way. She didn't travel with me to every meeting I did, but she would be there for me on a regular basis to be able to talk with. So mentors for your facilitators. Okay. That's a lot, right? We need resources. Let me go back to that slide. We need resource needs, and we got great potential. We got more money than we have had ever for conservation work. So why not use a system like CRM? If you got to rename it, okay, rename it. Just keep the 10 steps. Who knows what it'll be called in the future, but it's got a nice history and it's got an agreement. So it's kind of cool. So your future directions are really going to depend upon you, the 30 some of you that came on the line today, because you're the advocacy group. So Alyssa knows your name and knows where you're at and knows how to get a hold of you. Levi the same way. And then I think we get organized enough as a task group, right, to receive applications. Because I'm not sure, Alyssa and Levi, you'll have to tell me whether you've got any in the hopper. I don't think you maybe have, but you need them, right? You need them coming from the agency folks. Where would the next one be? Is it Asotin Creek? Is it Pataha Creek? Is it Menashtash again because it's lit up? Is it the Wild Horse or is it the whatever it might be? You got bears coming. You got bears coming to the state. So I think it might be around the grizzly bear, that sort of thing. I tongue in cheek, right? But maybe if you want to skate out ahead of it and try to figure out what it would look like when it was working like it should. Okay. Lessons learned. You need resources. You need facilitators. Good facilitation makes CRM work. The type of facilitation you need, though, isn't just to come in and do one meeting and leave. The type of facilitation that this takes is that you come in, you meet with them again shortly after. You get them started, you meet with them again. A year later, you're assessing how the results are that they wanted. And you're talking again about doing this. And one of the reasons a retired guy doesn't do a lot of these anymore is because I didn't need a lot of those lined up for me to do, where I couldn't go do Nana Papa time when I wanted to, or go see national parks. We're at 53, we're at 54 of 63 national parks in the United. So if you kind of get my drift, that I'm trying to stay away from those jobs that are going to mean that I need to be there every day, and every year and that sort of thing. Because I want to retire stuff. I want to do retire stuff. So that's kind of it. I don't mind doing it. And I think you've got from my enthusiasm today. I love doing this stuff. It's just that I've got to be careful or we're not going to see the other 9 parks or see our grandkids grow up or whatever. So there's my heartfelt thing. But you need that within the body of the 20 to 60-year-olds that haven't retired. You need a bucket load of facilitators that are really good, on call, ready to do this work, that are willing to progress with the group, right? You start with Odessa, you better stay with Odessa. You start with Menashtas, you better stay with them. You start with Chehalis flooding, you got to stay with them because you, the facilitator, needs to ride that ride with that group because they trust that facilitator and they know that that facilitator is going to do work with them, right? And help them do work. And you don't break that cycle if you can help it. That's the status. So you need as many of those as you can with people that are their boss, that understand when they say, I've got to go do that CRM thing. And the boss says, okay, good on you. Move on, press on. We love what you're doing. Just keep right on doing it. And if this has to wait till, another day, then that project that I was going to have you do is okay waiting because CRM takes precedent. Is that big? That's asking a lot, right? If I lined up the 12 executives right now on the webinar and said, would you do this? They'd probably hum and haw at me. But we don't need hum and haw. We need commitment if this is going to work. So whether it's called CRM or something else, that's going to be a choice in the future. we enjoyed the ride, as we called it, CRM. You know the birthing, you know where it came from. I think you know the potential. We set out to make sure that you had 4 objectives. One of them was to explain what CRM is and why it was developed. Did we do that? Yes or no? Okay. Second one was to explain how CRM has been useful for common pool resource management in the past, right, in Washington State, with specific examples related to the work we did. And thank you for those of you that chimed in on some of those they had. Did we do that? Tip of the iceberg, maybe, but we did some. Explain how CRM fits with other programs, projects, including our Voluntary Stewardship Program, the Washington Shrubsteppe Resiliency Initiative. Boy, that's a mouthful. Just list these things, the farmland preservation of, all of these things. And that was just the commission list. So if we had the commission list and 10 others, right? 10 other slides of other programs that could gain from this, I'm thinking it's kind of a big deal. I do remember. So did we do that? Okay. Highlight status of CRM as of the spring of 2024. I think we did that. The way it should work is that the cabinet level and the natural resources of the governor ought to be corresponding with the executives about the next CRM that's needed in the state of Washington, or CRMs that are needed in the state of Washington. They ought to be bragging about the Voluntary Stewardship Program because it's working using these 10 steps. They ought to be talking about these things. I will remember, not the year, but I remember the nervousness that I had when I got to go to the cabinet level and provide a synopsis like we've just done this afternoon on the coordinated resource management. And you could have heard a pin drop in the room while those executives and the governor's people listened to the successes that we had along the way of bringing local people together to solve real resource problems. The other thing that's interesting is I think that I do not want to give that impression that this is easy breezy. If I've done that, I've mistaken. So let me back up and say, this is hard damn work. This is hard damn work over time. This is not an easy fix. If you just crank off 1 through 10 and think you got it, you got another thing coming because you're going to get stalled at step number whatever, and you're going to have to go back with the group. You get a new person in the group that next meeting and you got to redo again. That's good facilitation practice. You hate it, but you got to go back to where that group was and get them to go on with you. And this is a trip. This is a real journey. It's a journey that takes time, effort, money, outstanding staff, some principled facilitation, if I might say it that way, so that you believe in what that group really wants to do. And let me tell you, as a facilitator that sometimes didn't agree with the direction they were going, my vote wasn't a vote because we don't vote. And I wasn't needing to reach consensus for me, just the group. The group needed to find its way. And I needed to help them get there, regardless of what I thought was right or wrong or indifferent, right? But and so this is really hard work, really good stuff. Lots of time for questions here. We built this in. Boy, the people that designed this program, they thought this stuff through. And so, questions do you have for a guy that's worked in this arena since 79? It could be on CRM, and quite frankly, if you want it to be on something else, that's okay too. Ask away. And James, thanks for your note. Thank you so much. And he had to jump to a 3:30 meeting, but here's the essence of it. One of them is, I am committed to finding more resources for CRM. So Levi and you folks, especially in the VSP program and other programs. Go ahead, Jennifer, please.
Yeah, I was actually going to ask a question related to James's comment there. I'm so happy to hear that he's committed to finding more resources for CRM, but this is maybe a question for some of the commission staff. Do we have any dedicated CRM resources currently in Washington state for funding? And then maybe a follow-up question for Ray of how are other states funding their CRM efforts?
Okay. Well, let's start with our state. And I sense Levi probably would be the one I would ask. Alyssa, is that right? Okay, Levi, fire away.
Well, the preface is I'm still learning as far as a lot of the details go. The Science Hub got $1 million totally for the hub, and we put in the decision package specifically. We wanted to focus on some of the work on CRM to help fill out the system of what we're doing. So I fully expect that we'll continue. Like, this was sort of sponsored, if you will, by the Science Hub. I think I plan to sponsor more events throughout this biennium with Science Hub funding. But the Science Hub funding is only currently just for one biennium. So I don't know if that will continue. And then I'm sure there are other buckets of money that we could think about, or other resources we could bring into the program. And I'd be happy to work with folks on that. I don't know if Alyssa, looks like Alyssa might have some more info.
Yeah, I'll just echo that. Yeah, we've got the Science Hub, but we have not established a dedicated funding source for just, I think, CRMs in general. Maybe that's something the Science Hub could do eventually, but it is exciting to see James's comment there in the chat now that he's had a chance to kind of absorb some more of this. So I think, yeah, we'll be looking towards that. But I also am interested in the question about what other states do to fund their CRM-like activities.
Yeah, this is going to be a little bit of old data that I give you, but normally what would occur is a project would be brought forward by a CRM, and depending on the nature of the project, they would go after funding from that agency or organization, to get the project funded. Once the CRM gets rolling, then they start looking around saying, okay, NRCS is a logical place to go for this money. Ecology would fund this part of it, fish wildlife. I got to tell you, to at least speak highly of our fish wildlife, DNR, Ag, and the commission, is that when we did have a real live project proposal, any one of those state agencies seemed to welcome it. And Roy Lane has been a big factor in CRM over the years too, and she has instructed her staff to find a way to fund a CRM type activity. But usually it's the project. It's not the initial CRM, meeting and talking and working and getting started, or facilitations. Some of us facilitators are expensive as heck. So, it's having money to be able to fund those, so that you hold their interest and keep them, locked in with you, right? And so I would say for the most part, it either comes through the Department of Agriculture, right? That's in good cases like Wyoming has in the past. But I got to tell you, to be real honest, most of them have died on the vine. Most of, the Idahos, the Wyomings, the Colorados, the California used to have a rocking system, but they had the self-fund, right? Department of Ag helped in Colorado for a while, definitely helped in Wyoming, like the one example I was giving you, really spun out some really nice things. Idaho, it was through the state commission, and then the state commission was absorbed by agriculture. So as we had some of these commissions move from independent, like we are, thank God we are, and need to stay that way, to absorbed within agriculture or natural resources or another agency, CRM was one of the things that fell off, right? They just didn't fund it. So project by project is what I got to tell you, the states, not good. That's why you guys need to be the leader in this, right? And have a supply of resources that you can make available. And I think you make it hard enough, right? on the CRM group to really have to come together, really want the funding. You just don't dump the money, a few $1,000s in that first meeting. I think you just let them come to terms with it, let them work a little while. Supply a facilitator, right, on those early days. But if they come up with project A, B, C, right, or practice marketing, they want to market these practices, right, in VSP, and they've got a real live dollars and activity chart, like James was saying early in our meeting, right, a real activity schedule that he could follow, that staff could follow, then I think you would be ready to put up the first money, and then you'd make it contingent on how they're rolling. Are they still meeting? Are they still working? Are they evaluating? Are they putting together a monitoring system? Are they working? Are they working? Because if they're not working, you don't want the money to flow there, right? You want it to flow to those that are working. So I think early on, be a little Scotch. Is that a bad term nowadays? Scotch with the money? Scotch might be something we would drink to celebrate, but be a little Scotch with the money on the front end, but be prepared to offer it in step 2, 3, 4, and 5 when they're really rocking it, right? And you got results going on. I mean, we needed some money in the Chehalis just to get that first initial data right on where we would put a dam, didn't we? Butch, or if Butch is still on, he'll tell you that one of the ideas that came out of the first meetings of CRM and Chehalis was let's get a dam in the upper watershed area to kind of control that flow down the Chehalis, so Vancouver and those towns down there didn't wash out. And there was ideas for water basins, right, that the flood waters could disperse out of and whatnot. Well, that takes money, right? Is to engineer that and plan it and put that dispersal in. I tease Butch quite often about animal critter pads where animals could get up and not die, from floodwaters, right? Those take real money. So if you understand what I'm saying, the progression would be not so much money on the front end, but facilitation. And then as the group starts to progress through their projects, help them with the project proposals and even some funding. That's hard to build into a budget package, isn't it, Levi? The only piece I heard myself saying was the monitoring piece. And you can build that one in pretty easily. It's like, oh, heck yes, we're all over that. But you got to put the project in and monitor it and see where it takes you, whether it's VSP or whatever. Hope I answered your question. I wish I had a wonderful statement that said, oh, this state, Ledgerwood state they're rolling into money and they're doing a great job, but I don't have that. So yeah, can't create something I don't have. All right, more questions, more discussion, more anything that you want to talk about today, because we have time. Let's go back to the chat, make sure. Did we miss any, Mike, in there? Hope we didn't miss any.
Just the one comment from Alan.
Alan, yeah.
Real facilitator, resolve the conflicts, salmon water quality, and variable agriculture. That's the only other comment on there.
I think
unfinished business, Ray.
Yeah, and it's so important. Alan and I were working on this years ago, and yet I think you need a facilitator, probably paid for, Alan, that that is going to stay with groups. You got multiple groups in there, and if I was to point to a politically charged area of our state, WIRA 1 probably is one of them, right? Where people are wearing their politics right out on their sleeve and they're not agreeing, but there's an agreeable piece there somewhere for salmon water quality and viable agriculture in the Whatcom, for sure.
The problem is that we are now in litigation on the water rights, and that's only one aspect of the larger problem.
Yeah. I mean, just the dairies, when to distribute the manures, when not to, all that sort of thing. I know your district's been involved in that heavily over the years, and we make breakthroughs, but are we taking a few steps backward now?
Actually, the conservation district is not actively involved in this larger process.
Okay.
It's being run by other forces.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
I think it's a hot potato that maybe the district does not want to get involved with. But
if I wasn't turning 70 in a few weeks, I'd really love to have worked on this one, because the importance of this is not escaping any of us, right? The importance of it. And if the facilitator and a CRM group in Whatcom could really nail these things down and get them going, it would be a model for a lot of places. So that's I got you in my heart. I was up there the other day visiting some relatives there in Bellingham. So thinking about you often, and hope you're doing well and George is doing well too. Miss you guys. Miss all of you.
George is retired. I'm still fighting the fight that I was when we were talking many years back.
Yeah. Well, doggone that, George. He was supposed to stay on forever, wasn't he? Yeah. Okay. More questions, more comments. Happy to take any of those on of any shape or size. All right. Okay. And I made this slide to make sure that we didn't forget this. So Alyssa and Levi, go ahead and fire away on this one because it's an important event coming up.
Great. Thanks, Ray. Ooh, I also see a comment in the chat. If you want to take a look at that.
Sure, let me go down.
Yeah. But yeah, I'll just make another plug for that advanced facilitation training. Ray talked about one of the big challenges right now is that those really experienced facilitators are wanting to spend more time with their grandkids or take vacations. And I'm really envious of all the national park touring you've been able to do. That sounds incredible, but we want to give more time for that quality of life and retirement. So we need more facilitators. So please consider signing up for the advanced facilitation training. That announcement will be coming out. If you're not in tune with the commission announcements, feel free to go to that website, scc.wa.gov/CRN, and you'll see my name and Levi's name on there, and you can reach out to us to stay in the loop on that when that announcement does come out. But we are expecting to do that in July or the beginning of August. So yeah, I think that's the main thing we have on that. We've also been looking for assistance to help put together. Thank you, Sarah. There's that link in the chat for you. Put together kind of an inventory of the existing CRMs that are out there and their status. I did put a note out to some of the districts who are involved with CRM. We know it's a really busy time. But yeah, we might be asking for more assistance in the future. We're going to kind of regroup on that as well. But yeah, any help you can provide would be greatly appreciated. And yeah, I think that's it.
Yeah.
Back to you, Ray.
Thanks, Alyssa. Brandy brings up a good point. Those of you that have been in CRM, worked before, good facilitation, whatnot, a reboot is what she's suggesting, and that she would be willing to also coach too. And Brandy, I appreciate that very much too. So glad that you're where you're at now. And I know this is very, very important to all of us. So finding those facilitators, Alyssa and Levi, if you can find those and through the task group, right? Find those. They could be agency folks, they could be district folks, they could be private individuals. The neat thing about an agency folk, right, and a district folk is they're already paid. It's always a good thing, right? But you could reimburse the district or the agency for their time if needed. Most of the agencies don't ask for that. Those of us in the private sector, we're kind of an expensive lot, and we're not, you kind of got to really think that through if you want to do that. But I do think the reboot would be necessary, and it looks like you've got the executive director's commitment, James, through the chat today, and so glad that he joined us. So with that, then it's a good system. It's a great system. It's one heck of a lot of work over time, and so if you're going to facilitate, get the training you need and get the experience you need. Brandy offered. I'm just a phone call away too. If I'm around and not doing Anapapa time or something, I always know when to turn off my phone and when to turn it back on again. But if you just had a simple question that we could just handle over the phone, or a session design that you wanted to look at or something like that, I'm always happy to help with that stuff. I enjoy it. Keeps my motors charged and keeps me at least in tune with what's going on. So I just wish you well. So glad that you attended today's webinar. And unless there's something else, Mike, is there any other announcements that we need to make?
No, I will get this recording up probably early next week on the CTD website. So
on the
that's
CTD
the only thing I have.
Again, I'm so glad CTD is still running along 4 years after you're doing two. I remember the birthing of that and with fond memories. For all of you, thanks so much for joining us. And you have a good rest of the afternoon. Take the rest of the afternoon off and go do something fun.
Thanks, Ray. Thanks all.
My
Thanks,
pleasure.
Ray. Thanks, everyone.
Take care, folks.